Wonderful, so wonderful is your unfailing love. Your cross has spoken mercy over me, over me. No eye has seen, no ear has heard, no heart could fully know how glorious, how beautiful you are. Beautiful one I love, beautiful one I adore, beautiful one my soul must sing. Powerful, so powerful, your glory fills the skies. Your mighty works displayed for all to see, all to see. The beauty of your majesty awakes my heart to sing. How marvelous, how wonderful you are. Beautiful one I love, beautiful one I adore, beautiful one my soul must sing. Beautiful one I love, beautiful one I adore, beautiful one my soul must sing. You opened my eyes to your wonders anew. You captured my heart with this love. 'Cause nothing on earth is as beautiful as you. You opened my eyes to your wonders anew. You captured my heart with this love. 'Cause nothing on earth is as beautiful as you. Beautiful one I love, beautiful one I adore, beautiful one my soul must sing. Beautiful one I love, beautiful one I adore, beautiful one my soul must sing. Faithful love flowing down from the thorn-covered crown makes me whole, saves my soul, washes whiter than snow. Faithful love calms each fear, reaches down, dries each tear, holds my hand when I can't stand on my own. Faithful love from above, came to earth to show the Father's love. And I'll never be the same, for I've seen faithful love face to face, and Jesus is his name. Faithful love is a friend just when hope seems to end. Welcome face, sweet embrace, tender touch filled with grace. Faithful love, endless power, living flame, Spirit's fire, burning bright in the night, guiding my way. Faithful love from above, came to earth to show the Father's love.
All right, welcome back, everyone. It's been a little while. Been a couple of weeks since we were last here in the Psalms on Thursday together, but we're getting back into it, picking up where we left off last time with Psalm 56, yet another of the many, many Psalms of David. So as we've been doing all the way through, I'll try to start out with kind of a high-level view of this particular psalm. Note some of the things that, to me at least, stand out about it, that make it somewhat unique. And then we'll note a brief outline to kind of help break it down, and then work our way through it, largely reflecting upon some of those things that we'd already noted here at the outset. But as with many of the psalms, we have the superscription, that on this occasion tells us something about the occasion for the psalm's composition. When the Philistines took him, that is David in Gath. Okay, so this is handy because we've been making our way through 1 Samuel in our Sunday morning class here recently, and of course, as you know from our study there, we have two occasions recorded in which David finds himself in Gath with the Philistine king Achish. These are in 1 Samuel 21 and 27. And people debate whether either of those is what's actually alluded to here, because in the superscription it says, when the Philistines took him in Gath. Of course, on both of those occasions, in 1 Samuel 21 and 27, David traveled to Philistine territory voluntarily. He wasn't captured or apprehended by the Philistines. But I have this note from Barnes that Brother Waycaster refers to, where he notes the words "took him in Gath" refer not to their apprehending him or seizing him or capturing him, but rather to their following or overtaking him. That is, by their calumnies and reproaches, so that he found no safety there. I'm not a Hebrew scholar myself. Barnes certainly is more so than I am. So I don't know. I suppose perhaps it could be either, because people take this either way. So if it's the case that he was taken in Gath in the sense that it makes the most sense to us as English speakers, right? He was seized, he was captured, he was taken by force. Then many would say, well, this is obviously some occasion in David's life that we don't have recorded there in 1 Samuel, because, of course, there were plenty of things that happened in David's life that we aren't told about, right? We have these certain events, certain episodes in his life that we have recorded for us, but there are many, many things. That is true of David, but of any biblical character. Jesus himself, many things that happened in his life that we simply don't know about because we aren't told. So it could be there was some other occasion with Gath that we know nothing about, save for this psalm reflecting upon it. On the other hand, if it's this other shade of meaning that Barnes talks about, where it says when they took him in Gath, it doesn't mean they seized him by force, laid hands on him, but rather you might say they troubled him, they vexed him, I guess you might even say, using the same word that we might use it the way we'd use it today. They took advantage of him. They were just a constant thorn in his side, so that he was never at ease in their territory. If that's the case, then it certainly could fit either 1 Samuel 21 or 27, either one. What I find interesting about this one, and it kind of comes back to what I've said about David repeatedly as we've been making our way through 1 Samuel. As we go through this psalm, there's one thought in particular that really jumps out at me here. I guess two, because there's one tied to it. But it's actually repeated twice in this psalm. It's in verse 4 and it's also in verse 11. Verse 4, he says, "I will not fear what flesh can do to me." And he says something very, very similar in verse 11. It's only a slight variation in the wording. But you have expressed here in this psalm, this very, very similar to umpteen other psalms we've seen. He's in a bad situation. His enemies are confounding him. He calls upon God to protect him. He trusts in God. He has faith in God. And again, in verses 4 and 11, he specifically says, "I'm not afraid of what flesh or man can do to me. What I find somewhat humorous about this is on both occasions, in 1 Samuel 21 and 27, again, if that has anything to do with this, on both of those occasions, he went to Gath in the first place because he was afraid of Saul and what Saul would do to him, right? It explicitly says so. And on both occasions, not only did he go there in the first place because he was afraid of Saul, when he got there, he was afraid of Achish, the king, and what he might do to him. So, in chapter 21, he starts reflecting upon his reputation when he gets there. Well, they do talk about how I've killed, my tens of thousands of Philistines. The Philistines might not like that, so maybe I should get out of here. You recall he feigns insanity. Achish is, irritated and vexed by this, so he sends him on his way. And then later on in chapter 27 and into 28, it's a different circumstance. Achish welcomes him because David has his own army, and Achish sees this is something he can take advantage of. But you recall, David was fearful about Achish finding out what he was really up to. Because remember, he told the Philistine king that when he would go out on these skirmishes across the border back into Judah, that he was fighting his fellow Israelites, when in reality he was fighting some of the other native peoples who were enemies of the Israelites. He didn't want Achish to learn about this, and he was so desperate for him not to figure out what was truly going on that he killed people, presumably innocent people, to keep them from spreading the word about what he was really doing. So here, as we come through the psalm, remember, again, I've said this a million times, David is a real person. If all you had were psalms like this, and that was it, you knew nothing else about his life and these kind of things that we read about in 1 Samuel, you might feel inclined to think, well, here David is held up as this just impossible paragon of virtue. How could I ever hope to emulate someone? I might as well just not even try. I might as well give up. Like, look at this incredible faith and this lack of fear. Again, as I said, the two instances we do have of him going to Gath, he goes there because he's afraid, and then he's afraid of what will happen after he gets there. And yet, despite that, we have psalms just like this one and countless others on other occasions. Again, keep in mind this may or may not be one of those two occasions. But he expresses this trust and this faith anyway. And that in and of itself is a tremendous lesson. Probably, I would say, the main thing to take from this psalm, just as it has been with others similar to it. You can still cling to that faith. You can still have that trust, even when you are afraid. And there's a lesson there. Again, we have a bit more to go on about David than just what he expresses in the Psalms. So, to my, you may disagree with me, but to my way of thinking, that makes David such a better example and model to look to, because he isn't perfect. He falls flat on his face numerous times, and he does know what it is to be afraid. Even though he expresses this confidence, I will not fear what flesh can do to me. Again, he's afraid of Saul, he's afraid of Achish, but he goes forth and does what he needs to do anyway. And knowing that he did have the struggles, despite these great proclamations we have in the Psalms, I think makes him that much more relatable, that much more real, and a good model for us to follow. Anyway, I'll climb down off my soapbox and we'll continue on. So a brief outline. So we have in the first two verses an earnest prayer on the part of the psalmist. Verses 3 and 4, an expression of trust in God. Verses 5 and 6, a description of the enemy. Verses 7 through 9, confidence that God would intercede. And then closing out, as they tend to do, verses 10 through 13, an expression of faith on the psalmist's part. Like I said, generally speaking, it's, in my personal opinion, a fairly vanilla psalm. It sounds like umpteen other psalms we could, but with one notable exception that we'll read through, and then I'll kind of circle back and call out what jumps out to me about Psalm 56, other than the occasion, which we've already talked about. It says, "Be merciful unto me, O God, for man would swallow me up. He fighting daily oppresseth me. Mine enemies would daily swallow me up, for they be many that fight against me, O thou most high. What time am I afraid? I will trust in thee. In other words, whenever. Whenever I fear, I'm going to put my faith in you, my trust. In God, I will praise his word. In God, I have put my trust. I will not fear what flesh can do unto me. Every day they wrest my words. All their thoughts are against me for evil. They gather themselves together. They hide themselves. They mark my steps when they wait for my soul. In other words, they're devious. They're plotting. They're waiting for any chance they can to get him. Shall they escape by iniquity? In thine anger cast down the people, O God. Thou tellest my wanderings. Put thou my tears into thy bottle. Are they not in thy book? And there in verse 8, I'll note when he says that, thou tellest my wanderings. It's a similar thought we've seen in other Psalms. You know who I am. You know what I've done. You know that I'm a faithful person. Put thou my tears into thy bottle. In other words, notice my plight. Take notice of it. Be aware of what's happening to me, that I might be avenged. Are they not in thy book? Again, he's saying to God, you know that I'm one of your people. You know that I'm faithful. You know that I trust you. Verse 9, when I cry unto thee, then shall mine enemies turn back. This I know, for God is for me. Again, in God will I praise his word, in the Lord will I praise his word. In God have I put my trust. I will not be afraid what man can do unto me. Again, echoing verse 4. Thy vows are upon me, O God. I will render praises unto thee. For thou hast delivered my soul from death. Again, reflecting upon the fact that it's happened before. Surely it will happen again. Wilt thou not deliver my feet from falling, that I may walk before God in the light of the living? Okay. Again, very a somewhat standard psalm, you might say. Verses 4 and 11 stand out to me the most in this, along with the last one, and I'll tell you why that is in just a second. But verse 4, he says, I will not fear what flesh can do unto me. Verse 11, I will not be afraid what man can do unto me. If you're one who takes notes in your Bible, put to the side of that Matthew 10:28, because Jesus says something very, very similar. Don't be afraid of mortal men, right? The people who vex you in this world, they can destroy your body, but rather fear God, who can destroy both body and soul, right? So David exemplifies that very thing. Again, he expresses it in very similar language to what you find there in Matthew 10. He's going to trust in God. He's not going to fear his enemies. Why? For the same reason that Jesus mentions in Matthew 10, ultimately, that God is the far more powerful of the two. So if you're gonna cast your proverbial lot with someone, it should definitely be on God's side, because God is going to come out on top every single time. David's enemies they have the capability to destroy him physically, but they cannot touch him in a spiritual sense. God, on the other hand, can do both. God can do both. So side with God, not with man. The other thing, the last verse. So David, as I said, we find multiple occasions in his biography that we have in 1 and 2 Samuel where he is afraid. Like I said, the ironic thing to me about Psalm 56, it specifically mentions the Philistines and Gath. He goes to Gath, to the Philistines, twice in 1 Samuel, and on both occasions he's motivated to go there by fear, and he's fearful when he arrives, when he gets there, and what he does after he arrives. Despite that, he's a faithful person. And we have Psalms like this that capture these types of sentiments. I've said many, many times, 1 John 1:7, John speaks of walking in the light as he is in the light. And I believe I first heard this from one of my teachers at Memphis, but it may predate that. But the expression I always like to tie to that is walking in the light is about direction, not perfection. A lot of people want to make it about being perfect. Clearly, he doesn't mean that, because he goes on in the very same passage there in 1 John to talk about how the fact that we aren't perfect, and we're liars if we like to pretend that we are. It's about direction, not perfection. It's understanding that you're going to inevitably fall short, but when it happens, you pick yourself up, dust yourself up, and you keep going. You remain faithful. You keep your trust in God. You don't allow it. You don't stay down. You don't give up. As John says, you confess the fault, you confess the sin, you repent, and you travel on. David is an excellent example of this, and in verse 13, it really fits the bill, because he specifically says at the very last phrase of the psalm, he says, "Wilt thou not deliver my feet from falling, that I may walk before God in the light of the living?" David is an example of walking in the light, and here he literally uses that exact phrase. He's going to keep his faith in God so that he can walk before God in the light of the living. So hopefully, you jotted Matthew 10:28 there alongside verses 4 and 11, because Jesus expresses the same thing almost verbatim. And then, if you take notes, jot to the side there at the very end of verse 13, 1 John 1:7. Walk in the light as he is in the light. It's about direction, not perfection. David exemplifies that very well. For all of his faults, for all of his mistakes, for his fear, for his sin on countless occasions that we find. Maybe not countless, you could count them, but it's more than one or two that we find recorded in his biography. Major shortcomings on his part. Despite all of that, he remained faithful. So that is Psalm 56 in a nutshell. Lord willing, we will continue on next time and make our way into Psalm 57. Thank you all very much for your attention.
Over all the earth you reign on high, every mountain stream, every sunset sky. But my one request, Lord, my only aim, is that you'd reign in me again. Lord, reign in me, reign in your power, over all my dreams. In my darkest hour, you are the Lord of all I am. So won't you reign in me again? Over every thought, over every word, may my life reflect the beauty of my Lord. 'Cause you mean more to me than any earthly thing. So won't you reign in me again? Lord, reign in me, reign in your power, over all my dreams. In my darkest hour, you are the Lord of all I am. So won't you reign in me again? Lord, reign in me, reign in your power, over all my dreams. In my darkest hour, you are the Lord of all I am. So won't you reign in me again? You are the Lord of all I am. So won't you reign in me again?